What's up, fellow lords of gaming, and welcome back to another episode of Marvel Future Fight. Today we're going to be jumping into the mid-June update for Moon Knight and Elektra. So we've got another Marvel Knights update essentially here. I'm really excited about this update, mostly because of the fact that it is a Marvel Knights update. And these are two characters from the Marvel Knights series that I think are near and dear to a lot of people's hearts if you grew up with those characters. But we'll jump into this and we'll talk about this discussion. In the meantime, however, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out the algorithm and it definitely helps me bring you content. So without further ado, let's talk about it. So what we got is we're going to look at the Moon Knight costume for this video. And I want to focus on a couple of things in here by breaking it down from where the character was in his previous uniform to where the character currently is. So this is the new uniform and it's from the MCU Disney series Moon Knight. How do I feel about it? I'm not so enthused about the uniform, if I'm being perfectly honest. And there's a number of reasons why, and we'll jump into some of those. But on first look of the uniform, I've got to say, to be honest with you, there's a lot of blandness going on. Like, a lot of the costume design feels very flat. These are supposed to be wraps everywhere, and a lot of it just feels very flat, except for the chest piece and the armaments, his shoulder pads. That's about where you see some really good detail. But if you start like looking past that midsection area, even up into his eyes and things like that, even with the little crescent on his hood, a lot of things start to fall flat and they just look very dull. It's one of those things like, yeah, you know, like the game is literally falling behind some of the current games that are coming to mobile platforms, and it needs to maybe catch up. And that's just my opinion, because you can start to see some of the limitations of the engine that they're using. So what I want to do, though, is I want to compare this uniform to his previous uniform, which was the Mr. Moon Knight uniform. So like, if you can see even what I mean here, like the crescent on this one stands out way more than the crescent on there. So there's like a little bit more detail inside that, you know what I mean? Like this one was pretty flat too, but it was highly glossy. So, you know, it is what it is, right? But let's take a look at these. First off is we want to take a look at these uniform effects, right? So on the previous uniform, he basically had chain hit damage by 30%. He also had increased skill damage by 50 and a bonus damage by 30%, right? So we still keep the chain hit damage, but we get a 5% increase, and it still stays at 50 and 30, but we also get an increase to basic damage dealt to boss types by 10%. So now what we want to do is we want to take a look at these skills. Oh, no, did I not? I thought I clicked on the uniform. Oh, well. All right, let's equip this uniform. And now we can take a look at some of the skills inside here, because I think that's what most people were interested in the first place. So we've got Moon Knight's passive skills, Moon Force, right? Not a whole lot has changed here. Basically, it's still 30% recovery with, 7-second cooldown. Along with that, we've got the Moon's Might. Again, not a lot has changed here at all. So like, we've got two passives for a character that is going into T4, and we haven't seen very much in change, right? So what we want to be looking at now is basically his skill sets. So the skill used to be called Moon Force, and now it's called Club Blow. Baton Beatdown. Now it's called Club Blow. So essentially with this skill, we lose the silence effect, and that's pretty much about it, I think. Yeah, so we also lose out on a decrease all speeds. So we get almost a even more blander skill than what we had here, because we got stun and we had silence. Oh, excuse me, we gain decreases all speed. That's what we get. So we lose the silence and we gain decrease all speeds. We look at Crescent Throw. Doesn't look to be a whole lot in terms of what was previously, except for the paralyze effect. Now on his Crescent Throw, we essentially get bleed damage, which is a whole lot of nothing, but you know, it's there. It removes elasticity, and then we get paralysis now, which ignores immunity. So we had paralyzed before for 1 second, but now we get paralysis, which ignores immunity, and it has a 5-second duration. Underneath is still the same cooldown time of 7 seconds. So that's good. His third skill, which was called Gentleman's Finish. This is where the most change that I can see is taking effect on the character. And that is now called Mercenary Bombing. So the biggest thing about this skill is that essentially we lose the 15% recovery of max HP. We also get a decrease in the basic damage by one attack from 100% to 60%. It's get a little bit of tick up in time because it's 6 seconds instead of the 5 seconds, but that's it. And then we basically get the added decrease all basic defense, so all defense down for 50% over there, right? So kind of weird. Being perfectly honest with you, that's kind of weird. It also doesn't have a physical damage of 200%. The physical damage goes down to 77%. Now, but you have to take the way that they've rewritten this skill, because the additional damage of 169 is now an additional 1014 physical damage. Really odd number to throw in there, like 1014. We also get a lesson in cooldown to increase in cooldown time from 11 seconds to 15 seconds. So this is going to be interesting because I'm going to show you where this recovery effect basically gets passed to and why I dislike it. By the way, we also lose the guards against hits, but I don't think anybody really necessarily cared about that. We roll into his fourth skill. Shotgun Showdown is now Crescent Attack. So for this skill, we basically have the bleed damage on it, remove elasticity, and then we have paralysis, which ignores immunity. So basically, we lose out on a 100% chance for immunity to all damage that is coming with this skill. Rolling into Lunar Punishment, right? So this skill is now called Judgment of the Moon. Okay, so the Moon Force skill, we get that when the Judgment of the Moon is activated from his passive. So this skill is going to obviously be important. Basically, looking at this one, when Lunar skill is punished, Lunar Punishment is used, this one's going to be here. So now we've got the Judgment of the Moon, right? So basically for this one is where we're going to get that increase again for, you know, the HP's basically underneath this to stay where it was before. We get the stun for 3 seconds and we get the frenzy buff as well. So not a lot here has changed, except that we get less physical damage of 99% and we get less on the new uniform because it's 82%. This is why people are seeing this as a nerf. It's even worse when you look at where some of these stats that were on the uniform went, right? Because where did it go? We were getting a recovery effect on his third skill before, right here, right? So I was showing you that on Gentleman's Finish. Well, if you go to his tier 4 skill, you can see now where the skill went. So that 40% of that we lost, basically, here it is. We look at the, because you can see the increase all attacks by 70% attack. You can look at the 20% recovery of max HP, and you can look at the increase all speed by 10%. So essentially what we get with the very first Transcended T4 character is a rearrangement or realignment of skills. Things are just placed in different places. Like this to me does not warrant a tier 4 when you tell me that you're going to remove the 15% recovery, put it on his tier 4, that, you know, now I have to work up my character to a tier 4 level just so that way I can get that same 15% recovery that was already on one of his previous uniforms on one of his skills. The all speeds, does this make a difference as well? No. And remember here, that 20% recovery is only applicable to himself. So I want to show you that because it's important when we look at the character's uniform and how the skills play out. Okay, so this is going to be a good video because I can also show you guys how you can tell what skills to use and the rotations and stuff like that. So let's take a look at some of the skills inside here. I think I have the SFX animation on here. So basically, let's take a look. So we've got the one skill. We can see that there's some iframes in the very beginning of the skill right here, but we know we're not going to probably be going to the well on our one skill too much. It's just decreasing all speeds, not a whole lot going there. When we roll into our 2 skill, we're essentially looking at that. I thought there would be way more hits on this 2 skill, especially when you see so many shurikens come out, but no. So then we roll into his 3 skill where he's basically throwing a canister at people. So it's important to notice on this skill, like when the buff effects happen. So as you're playing with skills, you want to basically be able to look up here to see the buffs that the skill is supposed to provide you and the debuffs that are supposed to provide to the characters. So for instance, I can throw this, I can see I get my buff immediately. You can see that right here, Mercenary Boss bombing, but you'll notice that the buff doesn't appear on the characters until a little bit of a delay. So this is how you know that you essentially need to delay the use of this skill in terms of like give it a delay cancel. Boom. So I have to wait till the bombs actually land for me to use this skill before I cancel out. That's essentially how it works, right? So I can see that I'm getting the burn damage on them. I can see that I'm getting the all defense down, and I'm giving myself the increased basic damage, right? So now we roll into the fourth skill over here. I was hoping for a little bit more from this skill as well. You know, it's not bad. It looks pretty, goes into this total darkness that's there, and it's basically just a bunch of the shurikens. To be honest with you, the fourth and the 2 skill could be the same exact damn thing, and we wouldn't even care about it, right? So when we look at the fourth skill overall, we can see that it's also applying bleed and paralysis. So that's it. It's not really doing a whole hell of a lot. So you don't even need to be concerned about when you cancel this skill. You know that it's got quite a few hits in there, so you're definitely going to use this somewhere in the combo, but it's not really providing anything necessarily that you're like, yeah, okay. But it's going to give you that paralysis, right? So now we roll into the fifth skill, and we can see basically the same animation that we had from the Moon Knight, the previous Mr. Moon Knight uniform where the moon comes up. I think it changes a little bit inside the other one, but it's pretty much the same animation. I really hate the fact though that regardless of whether or not the animation is reused and there's minor changes, Disney's been doing it for years. You can go watch Mowgli, the Jungle Book, and Winnie the Pooh, and just watch Christopher and Mowgli when they're walking through. You can see Disney reuses animations quite a bit. But the problem that I have with the animations is that, like, for all of that negative, this still looks amazingly cool, but the problem is you'll never see it because you more than likely will not use that skill with the animations on, because you run into a lot of problems in the game when you use animations. So this fifth skill right here, you can see here that it increases all basic attacks. So you get a buff and it just stuns the enemies. So not a whole lot happening there. So you're basically looking at the skill in terms of how much damage it's putting out. So there's a couple of ways you could probably play this, right? Because you can roll 3, you can roll 4, and then you can roll into 5. I messed up that rotation because I canceled out of 3 too early. So watch that again. We go 3, hit it 4, and then we can roll into 5. So you just basically have to delay that just a little bit, basically, in order to get the most out of it. Or, you know, like there's nothing necessarily happening on a fifth skill. There's a nice frenzy buff. Whether or not you're getting more hits on his fifth skill compared to his fourth skill might also matter. So you might be able to go 3. Yeah, so it'd be 3 to get the all defense down, 5 to get the frenzy buff, and then into 4. So we can go 3, 5, and then 4. Now, again, all you really need to be concerned with on here is when the buffs are actually happen to determine when the skill can be used. You know you want to use the third skill because it's going to open up with a nice defense down to your enemy. It's also going to stun them, so you know you can do that. Not to mention, if you look at the third skill, he basically backs away from himself to set some stuff up here. Fifth skill, we got to turn off the animation at this point because it's just going to mess us up from seeing some of the things play out. So we're turning off the animation. But he's in iframes at the time as well. You can see when the fifth skill plays out, he immediately gets the heal, and then he immediately rotates back into iframes and he gets the damage on them. See it? Boom, 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 boom. Simple, right? So realistically, that buff, that debuff that came inside there didn't affect them until much later in the animation. So right here, so that's when we can see it. Now that means that you probably have to wait for that debuff to happen to them if you're going to rotate 3 to 5 to 4. Since there's nothing on the 4 exceptionally happening, then you could probably just go 3, 5, 4, 5 and let that accumulate. Let's see, and we get about 348, so that's a lot better than us rolling 3 into 5 and then into 4, because you're basically missing out on a debuff there and a massive amounts of hits. So 3, 4, and then 5 is definitely going to be your playground for that skill. Now, Mr. Moon Knight's skill right here still takes the cake in terms of like staying the same. It's just his awakened skill. You work that into your rotation. Overall, it's just, you can see everything that happens along with that skill. So you'll probably still end up going 3, 4, 5, and then roll into 6. But here goes the interesting thing, right? With Moon Knight's new tier 4, if you go there, then you can essentially use this at the beginning of the skill. This will provide him some kind of buff. You notice that it sticks around and it lasts. So he's getting that buff during this whole entire time that the skill is up. So that's really cool. So you're essentially probably going 7, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or something like that, 7, 3, 5, 4, in order to open up on a skill, right? Like, especially if you were playing Giant Boss Raid Dormammu, then you would go here. Now, here goes the thing that I really want to put across, right? Should you purchase this uniform? I think you purchase this uniform if you are a fan of Moon Knight, if you plan on T4ing the character. Realistically, this uniform does nothing more than what we've seen a lot of uniforms in the past do, and I think that it does a really bad thing because it sets an expectation for players that we're not going to get the most out of uniforms as they start to roll out this T4 process. Like for me, for instance, I will purchase this uniform because I'm creating content. I'll purchase this uniform because I'm a fan of Moon Knight. I don't see myself T4ing Moon Knight. At best, I'll probably get him to level 80. I definitely don't see a lot of people choosing to use the materials that are so hard to obtain on Moon Knight over waiting for a Thor and Jane Foster release with Love and Thunder coming like literally next month. Why would you do it? It just doesn't make sense. Now, is this uniform good and is it going to stay good for you at level 70 and Awakened? Most likely it is. I mean, you're going to basically be working around a little bit differently than what you are now, but that's essentially where it's at. Like, there's not a whole lot to write home about this uniform. Unfortunately to me, there's not a lot of design for it. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I watched Cynic Alex and he even pointed out a very good point inside his video that I hadn't thought of when I was making my video, and that was the fact that there's not a lot in terms of this uniform when you look at the homage to the Marvel Studios show. So for instance, you know, when we looked at Scarlet Witch, you know, there's an incorporation with her skills for with her skills with Vision. You know, Vision pairs up. When you look at Loki, you know, you get the many variations of Loki inside his tier 3 animation. It's amazing. It's beautiful. He goes through all the different Lokis. Here we still end up with an Awakening skill that basically features Morbius and it features Elisha, which makes no sense, right? We've got multiple personalities for Moon Knight, where we essentially have they could have did Jake Lockley, they could have did Stephen Grant, they could have did Mr. Moon Knight, they could have did Khonshu, they could have did the Fist of Moon Knight. We don't get anything in terms of his tier 3 where we even see like maybe those personalities playing out. We don't get anything at all that is homage to the show. Now, I'm going to say something and I'm going to be perfectly frank with you guys. I didn't like the show and I grew up reading Moon Knight comics. No lying to you guys. I remember when Moon Knight was ripping off people's faces, when Moon Knight was a straight up badass mercenary, when you were like, people literally was like, yeah, well, Moon Knight is worse than, you know, Batman. Like the comparisons being there where it was like, yo, this dude is willing to do anything. The show didn't captivate that part of Moon Knight for me. It was a more clowny, gimmicky kind of Moon Knight that I wasn't really expecting and I really wanted better of. So essentially, having all that said, I'm not so pissed off that we don't get some of the homage to the show because the show wasn't homage worthy in my opinion. But this is what you have inside here. Is it a bad tier 4 to roll out? I think the best thing that this uniform does and this tier 4 does is that it basically shows us that even the awakened characters that we have currently come to know and love, they also stand chances of basically hitting that next tier 4 level, because we essentially could see characters like Moonstone hit a tier 4, right? That would be really nice. We could see characters like Beta Ray Bill hit a tier 4, so that'd be nice to see as well. So I'm kind of happy about that. The real thing that I want to look at with these uniforms is the meat and potato, is the comparison between some of the tier characters that are getting tier 3. Like, I fully expect that when Love and Thunder drops, that we're gonna get a tier 4 Thor and a tier 3 Jane Foster, Lady Thor. Where does the tier 3s align to the tier 4s at this point? That's going to be the best that we can go. So we've got Moon Knight and we've got an Elektra's comparison. Personally, I like the Elektra uniform look a lot more than I care about the Moon Knight uniform. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It really, really helps if you hit that like and subscribe button. Until next time, peace.